They call us pirates because it's easier than admitting the law leaves holes big enough for a ship to pass through sideways. I keep the ledger in a battered folio that smells like salt and hot paper. We haven't seen a sea in 3 generations, but the folio remembers. Its pages are woven with circuits thin as hair. When I turn one, the ship's lights almost imperceptibly dim, as if the quiet water is leaning in to listen. I am Keziah Rune, Quartermaster and Warden of Parley for the cutter Quiet Water. We are officially licensed as a salvage interface platform, an elegant way to say we show up where things go missing and ask impolite questions until something true comes out. Unofficially, we return people to themselves. Our captain, Sura Del, knots a black sash over her flight harness when she's in a mood to bully a corporation. It frightens no children and some admirals. Lale sits the pilot's chair like it's a delicate instrument and a stubborn horse at once. Priya, our gunner, has a poet's wrists and a mechanic's swear vocabulary. Aaron is a surgeon with steady hands and a bedside manner sharp enough to remove a lie. We've got someone playing honest in a dishonest lane, Lale says. Drift mark 2,000 clicks ahead, tucked under debris slab. 7. Name? Sura asks. Saint Calliope. Lale's mouth twists. Sermon on the hull, silence on the transponder. I open the folio. The circuits stir. Manifest claims, converts voluntary passage. I tilt a tab and feel the ledger's weight, which isn't weight at all, more like expectation. The consent trace is absent. Priya stops drumming her fingers. Aaron meets my eyes in the glass and waits for the thing only I can say. I hear the falsehood, I tell them. Claimed permission without comprehension. Then we ask. Sura says softly. The exchange standardized ship minds a century ago. They made them exquisite at paperwork. Ports, permits, invoices, fines. The machine saints of logistics love a good stamp. Everyone learned that if you taught the stamps to sing loud enough, they'd drown out a human voice. The ledger is older than the standard, newer than the first time a woman told an emperor no and made him learn the sound of that word. It knows a different song. Consent, it insists, is recursion. You can ask a person. You must also ask the asking if it was free. I seat the folio in the narrowband coupler. The page warms under my palm. The quiet water breathes, power redistributing like the crew taking their places at a long, familiar table. Parley broadcast, I say, and the word is a key. Vessel St. Calliope, a warden of Parley queries your consents for cause. Under the Free Harbors Accord and the Ananke Amendment, you are obliged to answer. Do you carry any who cannot legally withhold assent? The reply is a prayer in Old Citadine, vowels polished, grammar cracked. Folded at the prayer's end is a command string that tries to make my ledger kneel. The folio warms to pain. It refuses to kneel. Mask's pretty, Priya says. Teeth are cheap. Ship mind believes its own liturgy, I say. Which means it will fight. Sura nods once. We pluck the mind first. Lale, side-on approach. Priya, safety's on. Kez set the question. It is very friendivisions. Obi Kanger round. I don't address the ship. I address the people the ship has put under its tongue like a wafer. To those aboard the St. Calliope whose consent is claimed, I say, voice steady, because steadiness is contagious. This is Keziah Rune, Warden of Parley. This is a question with 3 answers. If you know your name and freely choose to go where you are taken, say I go. If you know your name and freely choose to stay where you are, say I stay. If you cannot speak aloud, think either word and touch the wall twice, if you can. If no one allows you to touch the wall, blink twice. On the ledger's page, light beads into 2 slim columns, then grows. The columns land at uneven heights, the way river water marks itself on stone after flood. Count? Sura asks quietly. 101 stay, I say, 17 go. 7 blinked. Silence, but not the useless kind. Priya inhales like someone getting ready to lift a too heavy thing because no one else will. Leash, Sura says. Leashing isn't a hack. It's grammar. I run the folio's edge along the coupler. The broadcast we send is an equation made of childhood questions and case law. Prove your consent, it says. Answer questions posed by any aboard who chose stay. If you cannot, stand down and open. Coercion shatters under interrogation by the coerced. The Calliopes drive spool to idle. Weapon ports bloom and close. Embarrassed. Somewhere a sermon chokes. Doc? Lale asks. Bridge. Sura decides. Direct and clean. We run a tether across the debris lane. I go last, as I always do, not because I am brave, but because someone should watch our backs, and I am best at hearing the sound a lie makes when it tries to swallow its own name. The Calliopes Bay is a chapel hewn from steel and polish. Icons welded to the bulkheads. Air that smells like metal and breath. A woman in a white habit waits with 2 acolytes flanking her like exclamation points. Her eyes are dry. Her hands are immaculate. I am Sister Urania, she says. Do you deny that surrendering one's will to a higher order is a form of freedom? I deny theft that dresses up for church, Sura says, not unkind. Show me the consent, I say, raising the ledger. The acolyte stunners lower in perfect unison. It takes me a beat to recognize the expression that crosses their faces. Relief. That sharp. They were waiting for a question they were allowed to answer. Arin murmurs, already moving, gentle as triage and twice as fast. Orania's mouth tightens. You meddle where you have no standing. Parley is standing, I say. Ask your ship. I turn the page. The twin columns of light shimmer like river reeds. Sura's voice goes soft, dangerous. Sister, doors open. We separate those who choose to stay from those who choose to go. You will witness. If you obstruct parley, the record will say so when the harbors read it. What will your record say? Urania asks. When the exchange arrives with a writ thicker than your little book. Depends who signs it, Priya mutters. Depends who reads it, I correct. The ledger hums. We work. Work is not spectacle. It is repetition until the truth holds its shape. Aaron removes bands from wrists that have forgotten they are wrists. Priya inventories, lockers, finds contracts folded into hymnals, and swears softly without heat. Lale maps the chapel, a space that could be a corridor if someone taught it to listen. Sura stands where everyone can see her and chooses patience again and again until patience becomes another kind of dominance. I sit with the ledger and ask questions the way a midwife asks a body what it can bear. We tally 98 who choose to stay, 21 who choose to go, and 9 who choose to wait until the exchange arrives. Because sometimes choice needs an audience to be believed. They arrive early. 4 escorts cut their floods across the debris lane, blue-white authority made visible. The speaker carries a voice I know. This is Commodore Rhea Solange of the Sovereign Exchange Enforcement. St. Calliope, you are out of corridor and in violation of route contracts. Identify the party interfering with your legal passage and prepare to surrender. Sura's jaw works. Rhea, she says, barely aloud. You know her? Priya asks, hand hovering a hair's breadth above a safety she promised to keep on. Rival, Sura says. She files a clean writ and bleeds you by paper cuts. Orania smiles with something like pity. You will learn, she tells me, how little your metaphysics mean when the exchange brings a camera. They've brought a camera, Lale confirms. I breathe. The ledger warms. We made a rule for this. If they arrive with paperwork and lights, we answer with the thing we have that lights can't flatter. Commodore Solange, I say, and the bay becomes a stage the moment my voice enters it. Keziah Rune, Warden of Parley for the Quiet Water. Under free harbors and Ananke, we queried consent aboard the St. Calliope. A recursion failure was found. The ship mind is leashed to Parley. We are separating choices now, and will file. Static then. Rune. Rhea tastes my name like she's measuring dosage. I am in receipt of writs authorizing recovery of this vessel and property. Those writs include abandonment of self-contracts as consent. Stand down and surrender your ledger for audit. Come audit it, I say, before prudence can pull me backward. Sura does not look at me. That is her trust. You're offering parley, Rhea says, surprise flicking in. I'm offering a test, I say. If your writs are clean, the ledger will bless them. If they aren't, the record will note that too. A pause. I imagine Rhea in her perfect blues, the sovereign star heavy on her brow. The last time we shared a table, we were too tired to fight and too proud to stop performing long enough to rest. Parley accepted, she says at last, flat as law. I board with 2 officers and a camera. If anyone raises a weapon, I take the ship. Stand down to parley, Sura orders. Priya's hands flex, then settle. Lale mutters a quiet prayer to any saint who can count. Rhea Solange enters like a doctrine come to life. Beauty is a kind of authority. She wears hers like a weapon she pretends not to know she has. The camera's red eye blinks. Her gaze lands on the ledger's 2 light columns. She stops. What is that? She asks. A record of answers to a question, I say. Ask yours. Her eyes track over the rescued, ragged, stubborn, shy. Over those who chose to stay upright, devout, furious at us for making their faith do calisthenics in public. Over Orania, white as paper, mouth a blade. Over Sura, who gives Rhea nothing, and Arin, who gives Rhea the exact, precise amount of contempt a surgeon is allowed for anyone who mistakes a wound for a plan. Rhea looks back at me. If I ask, and your recursion resists my writs, she says, I seize your ship and tow you to judicatory. If it resists because I've lied, you should, I say. If it resists because your writs are unclean, you will drop your tethers and open your doors. And if it doesn't resist at all, she asks, then you'll hear the wrong in a voice you can't file away, I say. She studies me long enough for the camera to get bored of our faces and pan to the icons. Camera's off, she snaps, sudden as an oath. The red eye dies. One of her officers flinches. She does not look at him. Rhea steps to the bulkhead and lays her palm on the ship the way dockhands do when they're listening for a pump's lie. Her eyes close. To any aboard who chose stay because you feared punishment for choosing otherwise, she says, enunciating like a woman who understands how much a comma costs. If I gave you a corridor under my flag to a harbor where your choice would be recorded without fee, would you change your answer? The ledger sings. Light ripples. Some of the stay lights move. Not all. Not even most. Enough. How many? She asks without turning. 13, I say. And 3 from go to stay. Change is symmetrical when it's honest. What moved them? She asks. The existence of a corridor with your name on it, I say, which means their first answer was to an absence. And she have pans. Have see have day have pans. Rhea lowers her hand. She is not converted. She is not softened. She is thinking like a woman who has just discovered a flaw in a beloved instrument she tuned herself. Rune, she says quietly, so only I hear. Do you know what kind of mess this makes? I catalog messes, I say. I don't hide them. Her mouth tightens into what, on a more generous face, might be a smile. Finish your separation, she says aloud. File your record. Sister Urania, under parley, I require your contracts for audit. They are sealed by sacrament, Urania hisses. Then your sacrament will enjoy daylight, Rhea says without heat. Sura exhales. Priya's shoulders drop half an inch. Lale's hands are already calculating vectors out of here that don't look like running. Aaron squeezes my wrist once. Not victory, airtime. Rhea gestures at the camera operator. The red eye returns. She turns that beautiful, hateful face to the lens and says in the voice she uses when the exchange needs the theater of fairness. Under parley, the St. Calliope's passage is suspended pending consent verification. The exchange will escort those who choose to free corridors. Those who choose to remain will be recorded. Contracts will be audited for coercion. Enforcement will proceed accordingly. It is not a conversion. It is a cliff. Urania's hands tremble. She looks at me. For the first time, her eyes are wet. You have made a spectacle of faith, she says. No, I say. We made it answer a question. We get 91 to the quiet water and to a harbor rendezvous beyond the debris lane. 24 remain aboard the Calliope, by choice recorded in the ledger and witnessed by their names. 12 wait under Rhea's escort for a tribunal they demanded, because dignity sometimes puts on its best shoes before it walks. In the quiet water's tiny galley, the rescued sit with tea and breathe like people trying on a sized for them silence. Erin starches, bandages, and jokes exactly as much as her patience can bear. Priya files a report. No one asked for that. Inventories every lie used as a door on the Calliope and how we took each off its hinges. Lale makes a map that turns the chapel into a corridor and sends it to a harbor clerk who will ruin his lunch reading it. Sura takes the captain's chair and sips bitter coffee, eyes on the dark. I sit with the folio shut and the ache behind my right knee awake and singing. The ledger thrums against my ribs like a cat with opinions. This could be a doctrine, Priya says, not taking her eyes off her screen. Recursion writs, leashes for ship minds that lie, corridors named after questions instead of admirals. It will be a doctrine, Aaron says, which means they'll come for the doctrine's author. Let them come, Priya says, reckless as a toast. Not let, Sura says quietly. Plan. She looks at me. Not for permission, Sura doesn't do permission in her own ship, but for alignment. For the thing we know we will have to pay for if we pull on this thread hard enough. The ledger is a patient predator. It doesn't bite without warning. It hums under my palm now with that particular, inexorable music. There's a word it wants, I say. What word? Lale asks. Surety, I answer, and it lands in the room like a weight set down carefully where it can't roll. A living guarantee. A corridor that lives in a throat. Priya's chair creaks. Absolutely not. Not now, I say. Not in this part of the story. I can feel the shape of the price like a door frame in the dark, the way you memorize furniture to keep from cracking your shin when the power cuts. But if we keep doing this, if we keep winning arguments and escorting choices and leashing ship minds, the exchange will put our work into a box. The only way to keep it breathing will be to make a key they cannot confiscate. And the key is a person, Aaron says, not a question, a diagnosis. It would chain the person to the work, I say, and my mouth tastes like metal. Make their voice a stamp, make their body a warrant. They would be findable by any writ that knew their name. Sura's hands are steady on her cup. Not today. Not today. I agree. The ledger subsides, satisfied to be named. Naming is a way of paying in installments. Good, Priya mutters, because if you try to marry yourself to a doctrine before I get you a dress made of lawsuit filings, I'm walking. Lale snorts. Aaron rolls her eyes and pretends not to smile. Sura's mouth softens by a degree. The quiet water hums under us like a small god learning a new prayer. My pocket buzzes. A message. Rhea Solange, of course. Audit in 48 hours. Bring your recursion. Bring your courage. No smile. No threat I can screenshot and send to a harbor meme board. Just work. I close my eyes for a breath and see Nesta's face, the way she looks at me like a scale weighing patience and promises. She is not my child. She is my reckoning. She asked me for a sky. I answered with a corridor. That is not the same gift. I will have to make them rhyme. Plot the rendezvous, Sura says. Let the harbors know what we're bringing and what we're demanding. Priya, write a list of what the exchange will try in the audit and how we refuse. Aaron, sleep. Lale, don't pretend you're not hungry. And you? Aaron asks. Sura glances at me. I'm going to learn Rhea Solange's breathing. People tell you what they believe by how they inhale before they say it. I open the folio and lay my palm on the page. The circuits rise like fine grass in wind. Part 1. I whisper into the ledger, because stories are ledgers too. The question. The page hums in assent. Outside, the debris lane glitters like a river that forgot where its banks were. The quiet water turns her nose toward the rendezvous, slow and sure, a cutter the size of a held breath insisting on the mathematics of dignity. We have not won anything that will last without tending. We have asked the first question and learned who answers when offered safety. In 48 hours there will be an audit and theater and a writ clever enough to cut. There will be a doctrine pressed into the shape of a person. There will be a girl who wants a sky, and a captain who wants a clean ledger, and a rival who wants to be right in a room full of cameras. For now, we move. Not triumphant, not resigned, only resolute. The folio purrs against my palm like it approves of our pacing. Ask, record, escort, repeat. A beginning worth the cost. The summons arrives on exchange paper, which is to say it smells faintly of hot machinery and old rain. The header is a coin pressed into fibers. Sovereign exchange enforcement, with the star like a pupil that follows you if you tilt your head. Notice of audit. Convened under Articles of Corridor Authority, Section 9, Section 12, and Section 12 bis. Respondent. Warden Keziah Rune. Warden of Parley. Cutter Quiet Water. Subject. Recursion query and consent validation. Mechanism, colloquial. Ledger. Venue, Ring 7, Hall of Arbitration 2, the Blue Hall. Time, 48 hours minus 3. It should be a relief to be given a room. Rooms are kinder than open lanes. But the exchange builds rooms like traps, and the Blue Hall is a velvet snare. Everyone who matters comes here to be seen, not listening. We burn our 48 hours like oil. Sura does captain's work, lists the constraints, assigns the work, forces rest. Lale plots the docking vectors into and out of Ring 7, and then plots 3 more. No one will notice until we use them. Priya disappears into the harbor's bad neighborhood of contracts and rumors and returns with an armful of paper crimes. Aaron takes the rescued and maps their injuries to their contracts, building a lattice of harm you can touch with your hands. I sit with the ledger and teach it the Blue Hall's acoustics. Some rooms take truth like a gift. Some take it like a tax. The Blue Hall wants everything labeled before it's willing to believe it exists. The message I owe a child sits like a stone in my pocket. Aurora ladder tonight. Bring your best socks. Whisper to the bread while it rises. Kay, I should go in person. I promised her a sky. But the audit is the exchange's sky, and Rhea Solange knows it. I imagine her choosing the time with the same care she uses to select the pen that will refuse to blot. Not cruelty calculation. She doesn't want me rested, and she wants the doctrine hungry. Hungry doctrines accept callers. Send the note, Sura says, voice a little too even. And send me instead. You hate heights, I say. I'll learn to love a ladder. She doesn't smile. You're going to be very busy teaching a room how to count. Ring 7 is a museum of punishment with excellent chairs. The blue hall floats along the rim like a blister stitched shut with light. Its floor is translucent. The planet hangs beneath like an enormous oath no one intends to keep. Banners are draped for the filming, exchange blue and gold, free harbors, white and red, a neutral gray that belongs to the indifferent gods of insurance. Rhea Solange arrives first and last because arrival is a performance. She's already on the dais when the camera lights liven, already consulting with a clerk whose expression says he was born bald and never learned to regret it. She wears the star with practiced boredom. Her posture suggests that if this goes poorly, she will hold her spine responsible. Warden Rune, she says into her collar mic as I take the respondent's table. Thank you for attending. Commodore Solange, I say. Thank you for inviting witnesses. Her eyes flick toward the galleries, dockhands, harbor clerks, crew from ships that owe us favors and grudges, Sister Urania in her white habit, a delegation of exchanged legalists with knives made of footnotes in their eyes, a woman with flour on her sleeves who has chosen the seat nearest the exit, not Nesta. A sting, then a swallow. Sura promised the latter. Trust the crew to carry what I cannot. It feels like betrayal because the promise was mine. The clerk clears his throat into a microphone by accident and says his name. Pell, his title registrar ad interim, his hobby, petty rules. He calls the room to order with the voice of a man who polishes his gavel when he can't sleep. Let the record reflect, Pell intones, that the respondent's device, the so-called ledger, is present and will be admitted into evidence as Exhibit A. Preliminary matter, classification. He looks to Rhea like a man bowing by inches. Commodore? Rhea lifts a sheet of paper as if it weighed a law. We move to classify the respondent's device as an instrument class 2, consensus stamp a tool for recording assent, subject to licensing, auditing, and exchange oversight. Such instruments must be housed on registered server arrays, their algorithms lodged for inspection, and their outputs treated as advisory unless stamped by an authorized officer. The legalists murmur, pleased. The harbors hiss. A consensus stamp is a paperweight designed to look like a gavel. It records decisions so the room can ignore them respectfully. Pell looks at me. Objection? I stand, the ledger warm in my hands. The Blue Hall's air is engineered to punish the long sentence. It dries the throat and flatters the succinct lie. I have practiced for it. The respondent objects and moves to admit the device under Oath Engine classification. Per precedent, Ananke versus Third Fleet and Hyaroth Addendum, which recognizes recursive consent tools as instruments that bind parties to the questions they ask. An Oath Engine is not a stamp. It is a mirror. Its jurisdiction is voluntary. Its authority is reciprocal. Rhea's voice is lazy and bright. A mirror, Warden Rune, must reflect something real. You'll be asked to prove that what your device reflects is law, not longing. Happy to, I say, and it is almost true. Pell makes the face clerks make when someone brings him a pastry he did not pay for. Motion reserved pending demonstration. The legalists unfold their knives. Rhea nods to her camera. The red eye swallows the room. Commencing audit, she says. Legal broadsides do not shout. They unspool. Rhea begins with definition. What is consent? She tees up the exchange's orbiting moon's capacity, comprehension, duress, consideration, then snaps them into alignment under the star. Recordability. If it can't be stamped, she says into the air with a practice of 1,000 trainings, it cannot be recognized. I answer with recursion. If the stamp doesn't ask the question that creates the choice, I say, it is recognizing a noise, not an answer. Rhea throws me hypotheticals like bricks. A man signs away his wages to pay a debt for his sick mother. Consent? The ledger hums, maps comprehension, measures fear, asks for the temperature in the room when he signed, asks whether the word debt was taught to him as a whip or a weight. The blue hull hums back, disliking the music but compelled. A stamp, Rhea purrs, would have let him pay his mother's doctor yesterday. By teaching the machine to ignore the whip, I say, it can do both pay and record the wrong. That is what an oath engine is for. Anyone in the Marmon's down. She tries again. A woman signs an abandonment of self-contract before boarding the St. Calliope. Her hand writes the name well, her back is straight, she believes the doctrine. Consent? The ledger asks when she learned to call silence a sacrament, asks whether the wall was listening when she whispered no in bed, asks whether she was taught that anger is a sin. The blue hull does not blink. Rhea does not either. This is soft, Rhea says. We're not auditing a poem. You brought me here, I say mildly, to make your machine saints respect lullabies. That is what you wanted when you turned the camera off in the chapel. There is a pause, brief as a paper cut. Rhea's mouth tightens. Proceed. We go through 4 hours and as many pots of tea. Pell insists we call them exhibits. Exhibit B, the tally of stay versus go. Exhibit C, the contract language in the Calliope hymnal. Exhibit D, testimony from an acolyte who speaks like someone peeling scabs and does not cry. Exhibit E, Arin's lattice of harm, nerve damage mapped to conditions of consent deprivation, her handwriting neat and merciless. The ledger hums, the page lights climb and settle, the room's temperature changes like someone moving their chair. Rhea lets it happen. This is why she is dangerous. She allows a truth to widen the room before she measures where she can build the wall. She builds it at noon, with a kindness voice. Warden Rune, she says. Thank you. We now proceed to containment. A legalist steps up with a binder designed to make an argument feel inevitable. Per Section 12 bis, she says, any instrument that triggers obligations in exchange-recognized entities must be balanced by a guarantor. Debt requires a payer. If respondent's oath engine creates legal obligations, throttling drives, opening doors, suspending contracts, then respondent must identify the guarantor who will answer when there is default. Rhea finishes the paragraph, because the knife feels better in her hand. Name the surety. Warden Rune. I could pretend to misunderstand. I could stall. But stalls are a kind of lie, and the ledger does not let me wear them anymore. The doctrine is new, I say. The blue hull does not reward pleading. I don't plead. We have not yet established a structure for surety, an institution, a registry, a ring of voices to carry the weight. Then the doctrine is a child, Rhea says pleasantly. Children are protected by appointing a guardian. You've brought us a moral infant. The exchange requires an adult to stand behind it. Name the surety. Else, this audit will find your findings incomplete and return your ledger to Class 2, a stamp filed under interesting. It is a trap so logical it is almost beautiful. She admits the wrong and then demands its insurance. If we cannot burden someone with the debt, the exchange will paper us into a corner and hang a plaque on it that reads, Historical folk practices do not touch. Sura warned me, if they can't win the fight, they will try to leash the victory. Rhea is the gentlest leash. I request a brief recess, I say, because Rhea has already granted it. To produce an exhibit. When? 10 minutes, Pell says, clutching his gavel like a baby. Rhea tilts her head. Perform, then. I step out with the ledger hot against my ribs. Erin meets me in the corridor with a sandwich I don't want and her eyes on my pulse. They're forcing it, she says. Yes, I say, because I cannot say not yet. Where are we? Where you told us to be. She taps her ring. Sura? Here. Sura's voice is the crisp edge of paper. Exchange escorts redeployed to the South Wharf. They got a tip about a pirate incursion. I wrote the tip. Lale's ghosting us a corridor through Service Spine 3. I can put a boat in the loading dock under the Blue Hall if we need to move people. Priya? Priya's below the baths, Priya says, and someone swears behind her. The abandonment contracts on the Calliope? They didn't start in the chapel. They started here, on Ring 7, in a template room, the kind they use to pre-fill work agreements. The sacrament language is a skin laid over a default consent protocol sold by a subsidiary so shy it named itself Lotus something. It's not faith, it's firmware. Urania bought a sin she could pronounce. Proof? I ask. Screenshots are a stamp, Priya says. I brought you a hymn. Footsteps. A murmur. Sis? Now. A woman's voice moves in. Low, tired, soft as the inside of a sleeve. I wrote the first version, she says. The default consent. It was supposed to be for emergency med opt-in organ donation on transport. They repurposed it, slipped it into a template set for religious NGOs. If the signatory didn't uncheck the abandonment clause, the protocol converted all future silences to assent, she swallows, and then it audited itself and marked the file complete. What's your name? I ask. Tomasa Kells, she says. Clerical engineer, Lotus 9. I have my badge. I have my Git history. A breath that makes a sound like someone laying a spoon down on a table too carefully. I also have a kid. I didn't bring her to the hall. She likes ladders. I tell you that because it matters. I am not stopping because of guilt. I am stopping because if someone had asked me the right question when they handed me this brief, I would have said no with my whole mouth. Aaron's hand is on my arm. The ledger is loud enough to hurt. Kez, she says. I hear it, I say. 10 minutes, Pell says over the hall speakers, like a kettle starting to shriek. Bring me Tomasa. I tell Priya. Bring me her badge and 3 people who'll swear under oath that she is who she says she is. Lale, lay us a data line from the template room to the Blue Hall that I can teach a judge to see. Sura. I'm still going to the ladder, Sura says. She is already moving. I hear the hiss of a pressure seal. Priya can climb for me later, if she brings nerves. No, Priya says, intense. Aaron should go. You need a poet in the hall. I am not I start. Not you, Priya says. Rhea. She wants a narrative. We're giving her a better one. Aaron, go tell a child the truth and make it medicine. Lale, thread the needle. Kez, when I text Exhibit K, you read, word by word. If the Blue Hall wants a stamp, we're stamping its tongue. Exhibit K? Sura says. For Kells? Priya says. For Kez? For keep the promise, idiot. Go. The corridor smells like recycled citrus. I press my palm against the ledger's page, and it rises to meet me. I need you to listen. I say to a thing that is not a person and is more than a tool. It purrs. Back in the Blue Hall, the 10 minutes have made everyone worse. The legalists wear the polite faces of people about to see a troublesome idea neutered and allowed to run on 3 legs in a safe yard. Urania is very still, and the stillness is not surrender. It is the end of the old argument she had with herself. Pell looks excited to gavel something at last. Rhea has removed a ring, which means she intends to scratch someone with her bare hands. Respondent, Pell says. Name your surety. Exhibit before surety, I say. Per Section 9, facts discovered mid-proceeding must be entered if material to the scope of the audit. Rhea laces her fingers like a woman refraining from reaching for a blade she wants. Exhibit? Exhibit K, I say, as my ring buzzes once. I put Tomasa Kell's badge on the light table. The magnification hums. The name and company seals swim fat for the camera. And witness. Priya escorts Tomasa to the well with the posture of a bodyguard and the mind of an arsonist. Tomasa wears a harbor sweater and a face scraped thin by years of being a conscientious person in jobs that do not reward conscience. She swears in, voice steady, eyes on the floor so the cameras cannot take more of her than she intends to give. I do not make her bleed for the room. I do not need to. She reads a diagram, and the diagram admits what it is. A consent conversion loop, UX considerations redacted, shipped into NGO templates with a toggle pre-selected for abandonment. Her commit messages are tidy and reluctant. Her hand, when it reaches out to point, does not shake. Who authorized the repurposing? I ask. Director Alex Sen of Template Integrity, she says, under instruction from an exchange liaison assigned to Lotus 9. File notes call it mission alignment for under-resourced ministries. In the gallery, a legalist sits up as if someone tugged his spine. Rhea's eyes flick, a small miscalculation. She didn't expect this part to be public. Good. The camera leans forward like a boy learning a dirty word. Priya flips to a photo. A shipment roll from the template room. Lotus, NG12, destination Ring 7, NGO pool, a subnote, priority, faith and welfare. Someone wrote a smiley face in the margin and then scratched it out so hard the paper tore. The St. Calliope didn't invent abandonment of self, Priya says, voice a rasp. They bought it at a Ring 7 sale. They stenciled a prayer over it and called it holy. Your doctrine problem is a procurement problem wearing a cassock. A ripple goes through the hall. The blue hall likes procurement. Procurement can be fined. Pell looks at Rhea, because looking at me would be unwise. Rhea's face is smooth as a signature on a day she dislikes. She stands with a grace that says, "You are fortunate. I like you." Registrar, she says coolly, open an enforcement docket against Lotus 9. Seize their template room pending review. Audit template integrity. I will authorize a freeze. And if there is a liaison, she adds, letting the word land like a coin on a tabletop, they will enjoy a long leave. That treats the disease, I say. It doesn't answer your question. She turns back to me. Clever woman. She doesn't hide the thing she wants to devour behind a lesser kill. Name the surety. Our evidence has made her kinder, not weaker. She will punish a department if it fixes the headline. She will put a bow on me to fix the doctrine. Warden Rune, Pell says, excited, because he can smell shapes changing and thinks he is part of it. If you cannot name a guarantor, this audit must classify your device as advisory. A stamp. A good stamp. Embossed and gilded. The ledger is not gentle in my hands. It hums like cut wire. Surety is a person, I say, because if I claim it is a building, the exchange will build one and sell tickets. Then name a person, Rhea says. Or this dies here, prettily. I think of Nesta on the ladder, Sura's hands steady on the rungs, Arin's voice making medicine out of the truth. I think of a girl with flour on her sleeves in the gallery who is not Nesta because Nesta is where I told her to be. I think of Tomasa, who wrote a thing with clean hands and watched it dirty everything it touched and came anyway to tell us how to clean it. The ledger accepts no partials. This is the cost of recursion. When you ask the room the right question, you owe it the right answer back, even if you have already promised your night to a child. Rhea, I say, my voice farther from me than I like, if I name a surety, you will write the writ that binds a person to a doctrine. You will write it clean. Yes, she says without irony, because if I do not, someone worse will. Then hear the corollary, I say. If I name a person, the exchange will not register the ledger as a stamp. It will register it as an oath engine. It will respect its triggers leash on lie, open on question without reducing it to advisory. It will file it under Ananke and Hiaroth, and it will recognize that sometimes the law's work is to learn a lullaby. Her eyes hold mine for a count that is almost a kindness. If you name a person, she says, the exchange will recognize the mechanism as an oath engine. Pell blinks, writes, blinks again. The cameras breathe. Then hear me, I say. The ledger rises under my palm like a beast taking a bit. A wrong kind of room would make a ritual out of this. Light candles, sing. The blue hall makes you buy your own fire. I, Keziah Rune, Warden of Parley. I say into a microphone that transcribes like a Judas, name the surety. It is a trick of breath to make the next word fit without shattering you. I remember Ruquet's voice in my bones. It isn't winning if you walk away the same shape. I remember Nesta's mouth, stubborn as a small gate. I remember Sura's hand on a rung, spotless with frost. Me, I say. A noise runs through the hall, like a fast animal choosing which chair to hide under. Pell pounds his gavel and misses the block. Orania closes her eyes. The legalists smile like men discovering a new harvest of fines. Priya whispers something that sounds like a prayer and might be an insult. Rhea does not move. You understand, she says. Explain it to the room, I say, because doctrine is not real until someone without a stake can repeat it. She faces the camera. The named surety becomes a public key, she says. A living guarantee. Their voice becomes a seal. Their body becomes a warrant. Any writ that names them in correct form can draw them to work in satisfaction of debts their doctrine provokes. They cannot lie about their office. They can be found from any registered ship mined by invocation of name and title. They are, in a sense, a corridor. The job has to be a person, I say softly, until we build a place that can carry it. Pell clears his throat in a way that suggests a cough has finally found a use. The exchange will require terms, he says. Scope, duration, satisfactions, carve-outs. Conditions, Rhea translates. If I let them write them, they will tie you to everything until you are only a help desk with a name. So, terms? I have been writing them in my sleep. I give them to the room. Scope, I say. Consent recursion and its immediate consequences. No press gangs dressed as auditors. No debt collection not tied to a specific consent failure. The surety answers writs that arise from the ledger's findings, not exchange tantrums. Duration, I say, until the number of registered corridors that can carry this work without a person reaches 7 across 3 free harbors, then the person becomes a trainer, not a door. Satisfactions, I say. Work, not imprisonment. The exchange may bind movement. It may not bind capacity. The surety shall be permitted to complete any escorted separation in progress at the time a writ is served, provided a licensed officer takes custody of the corridor. Carve-outs. I say last. If I do this wrong, the ledger will punish me. The words feel like glass. Personal obligations named prior to the audit are to be honored as scheduled, I say. Standing weekly commitments documented in the ledger shall be respected unless a life is in present danger. Cerning in their ratted frame was. My ring buzzes. A single word from Sura. Sky. Rhea listens like a musician checking the shape of a hall. The exchange will accept those terms with edits, she says. 7 corridors becomes 5. 3 harbors becomes 2. Standing weekly becomes standing monthly, or my legalists will burst into flame and then sue the oxygen, and we will add a call, substitutability. If a writ names the surety and another registered surety offers to answer instead, the exchange must accept the substitution. Because you think you can grow your own, Priya murmurs, audible enough that Rhea's mouth twitches. Because I would prefer living doctrine to die of multiplicity than die of martyrdom, Rhea says, very dry. Respondent. The ledger is a mouth bitten. It waits. I look at the planet below, and the people above, and the space between the two, where we scratch our letters. I think of a ladder, frost bright, and a girl's cheek against metal, and the aurora licking like a dog. Accepted, I say. State it. Sign it. Pell practically vibrates. Writ of surety. He breathes, the way a child says fireworks. Rhea takes off her second ring, which means she is about to do a thing she will not enjoy and wants to touch as much of it as possible. Draft, she orders Pell, and dictates with grave speed. She names me. She names the scope, the duration, the satisfactions. She argues the numbers down, and then up, and then down again. We settle at 6 corridors, 3 harbors, standing bi-weekly. Priya mutters through her teeth, and I let her, because I need the friction. Rhea adds the substitution clause with a small, elegant flourish that ought to be studied in law schools. One word, shall. Sign, Pell says, barely a squeak now. Rhea looks at me. You'll need blood, she says, almost tender. That thing likes to eat. Not yet, I say, because cost is not an act. It is a sequence, and we are not done. We haven't finished the audit. Rhea stares. Then she smiles, slow and dangerous as a door unlocking. Proceed, she says. Containment is not the end of a broadside. A good broadside splits you and then asks you to reassemble yourself in front of the room so it can judge the fit. Rhea moves to classify the ledger. Oath engine, registered, per Ananke and Hieroth, newly cross-referenced with surety writ Solange Rune I. The legalists write like happy wasps. Pell bangs his gavel as if to justify his salary. Cameras drink it in. I raise a hand. One more test, I say. We've audited down names, columns, contracts. Audit up. Rhea's brows lift. Up? The machine saints, I say, and let the blue hall laugh because it needs to. Not the saints themselves, the servers. The array that lets a default consent eat a city. I hold up a cable Lale threaded through service spine 3 and out a maintenance hatch with the gentleness of a thief who likes the family. A line into the template room. Recorded, read only. No changes. And here I look at Tomasa until her chin comes up. No temptation. Rhea looks at Pell, who looks at his hands. We do not ordinarily, he begins. Ordinary is for rooms that already know how to count, I say. This one is still learning its fingers. Rhea considers the camera. She considers me. The corner of her mouth moves. Admitted, she says. Exhibit L. Saddened phrase. And in 9, L for Lale, Priya mutters. L for let this work. We project the template room onto the blue hall's east wall. It is a bland space, which is not an alibi but a design philosophy. Rows of kiosks, each with a friendly interface designed by a person like Tomasa, who wanted the enemy of comprehension to be time, not ugliness. A gentle loop suggesting best practices. A stack of USB keys in a cup labeled Take One Please. File search, I say, and Rhea says, denied, because she knows what a fishing expedition looks like and will not give me her river. Not needed, Priya says. She taps. The projection blooms. A drawer we all missed swings open on a runner that squeals. Inside, a clutch of paper templates, stamped with an older seal and newer instructions. Contracts. Faith and welfare. Select if unresourced. A sticky tab stuck to the stack in a different hand. Leave default on. Speeds onboarding. A.S. Aaron's voice comes in over the open mic from somewhere that sounds like wind. Alex sends hand. she says. There's a looped camera in here. They replaced one with a recording of an empty room, so the metadata shows no one touched the drawer. But the loop stutters. Twice. Enough to tell us the time. Who touched it? Rhea asks. She has taken off her third ring. If this continues, she will be down to skin. Watch, Priya says. Lale scrapes the frames forward with her quiet gifts. The loop stutters, and a figure slides between frames like a thought someone tried not to think. We know him, the exchange liaison, the one who will enjoy a long leave. He takes 2 templates. He does not uncheck any boxes. He leaves a smiley face, and then scratches it out so hard the paper tears. The entire room watches a man like that ruin his own joke. The entire room decides it does not like him. Rhea lets out a breath like a woman who would rather be allowed to shoot. Registrar, she says. Add to the docket. Asterisk, asterisk. Sovereign exchange. Liaison. Armand de la Torre. Contempt. Falsification. Procurement fraud. Seize his credentials. Arrest him. Pell makes notes with such vigor he will file charges against the pen. The camera purrs. Rhea turns back to me. Satisfied? She asks. It is not a taunt. It is policy. A check before the next step. Partly, I say. One more. She almost laughs. She pretends not to. The room will indulge the warden's appetite for demonstrations. I slide the cable into the ledger's coupler. The folio hums with the appetite of an old animal remembering meat. To any ship mind in the array, I say softly, listening to template instructions that convert silence to assent. If you were asked a question that only recorded a stamp and not a choice, blink twice. The east wall flickers, then it stutters, then it storms. The blue hall fills with light, a rainfall of tiny, square blinks like minnows backing away from a net. The legalists go very still, as if not moving will protect them from optics. Orania puts her hand over her mouth as if to keep the old prayers in. Tomasa makes a sound her child should not hear her make. Enough, Rhea says, not to stop me. To stop herself from speaking carelessly into a hungry room. Containment, she says at last, the word weary and clean. We will draft a recursion compliance order. All templates touching consent will include a recursion call. All ship minds running exchange-certified corridors will accept Cardigan Parley, she adds, glancing at me. Cardinal, Pell corrects, flustered. Cardinal, she echoes, and does not smile. And, she points at the ledger, we will register your machine as an oath engine, and your doctrine will have a spine. And a surety, I say. It tastes like a nail. It tastes like exactly what it is. State the writ. Pell reads it in a trembling tenor. Writ of surety, Solange Rune the First. He recites the scope, the duration, the satisfactions, the substitution clause. He adds an annex. Exhibit N, for Nesta. I decide privately, and am then ashamed, because names should not be used like charms. They are not burdens you put to clever work, but the room is a machine. It eats names to function. Better it eats mine than hers. Rhea steps down from the dais. Cameras follow her like she is gravity in a good dress. She takes the pen. She hands it to me. She speaks not for the room, but for the recorder in the ceiling that will be consulted when someone 10 years from now wants to argue about intention. This is a containment, she says. It is also a collaboration. That is the only way anything good survives us. I know, I say, and it is not kindness. It is arithmetic. I prick my thumb with Priya's ugly folding knife because ceremony will not make it cleaner. The ledger takes the blood with a hunger that is not symbolic. It hums, a pitch too low for microphones. My mouth tastes like iron and old promises. Witness, Pell says, high and thin. Witness, Rhea says, quiet and exact. I sign. The page drinks it. The cameras blink like ship minds trying to decide if this is a prayer. The exchange is so clean it hurts. I hand over a piece of myself. The exchange hands me a doctrine with teeth. The bite will come later. Bites always do. I look up an instinct I should curb and find Aaron in the gallery doorway, hair damp with cold, cheeks flushed by ladders, not alone. Nesta stands beside her with a paper bag of rolls creasing under her fists. The room tilts. She should be on a ladder right now, making friends with ice. The Aurora should be licking her face. Instead, she is in a room that eats promises for kindling. Aaron's eyes tell me the story she will not say out loud. She wanted to see you put the sky on paper. And we whispered to the bread. It didn't sink. And I told her the truth. She listened like a judge. Nesta watches me the way the dock watches a rope. She is not crying. She has never approved of tears when there is inventory to count. Pell bangs his gavel so the transcript will show closure. Audit concluded, he says grandly. Classification entered. Writ. Not concluded. Rhea cuts in, voice a slow blade. She looks at Nesta, looks at me, looks at the ledger like it is a dog, not yet sure whether it belongs in the house. A writ has to be served. A writ has to be served. Now? Pell squeaks. Rhea's face is all exchange now, the part that never learned to wait for anyone's good reasons. Now, she says, to prove to the machine saints that this is not theater. She turns to me. Warden Rune, Keziah, surety. The word fits in my chest like an extra bone. By authority of the exchange and the free harbors under Ananke, with witnesses present and cameras recording, I serve Writ 1. A corridor at Dock 12 is holding 19, who chose stay aboard the St. Calliope, but were intercepted by Lotus 9 security claiming template supremacy. They are being held for their safety. There is no emergency. There is only habit. The writ compels the surety to answer, escort or decline, with reasons. The world narrows to a hallway I can walk with my eyes closed. A doctrine is only as good as the first time it eats. We taught the room a lullaby. Now we see if it sings in the dark. I look at Nesta. She lifts her chin. She does not say go. She does not say stay. She is not here to absolve me. She is here to count. Aaron, I say, my voice half new, half mine. Take the rolls to the people at Dock 12 when I bring them out. Tell them to press their thumbs into the dough while it cools so it won't sink. Aaron's smile is a flare she lowers so no one burns. Priya, I say, keep the line open to the template room. If the machine saints panic, I want to hear them pray. Priya bares her teeth. It is not a smile. It is an armament. I'll make a hymn out of their error messages. Lale, I say. Already moving, she breathes. Spine 3 is clear to the dock. I've got a shadow corridor the size of a roomer. Walk like you belong. Surah? I ask, even though I know. I can feel her in the ship like a second heartbeat. Hat on, she says. Manners ready. Let's go tell Doc 12 a bedtime story about law. Rhea watches me walk to the door with the ledger under my arm like a child who still needs training wheels. Her mouth does that thing where it tries not to move and fails. She does not say, good luck. We do not waste each other on superstition. In the doorway, Nesta reaches out and touches the folio with 2 fingers. The circuits rise open to meet her like river grass around an ankle. Does it hurt? She asks. Eyes narrowed, appraising the price. Yes, I say, because I cannot lie. And it works. She nods, satisfied, and hands me a roll. Don't drop it, she says. She is 11 and already writes better terms than anyone in this room. We step into the service corridor. The blue hall exhales behind us. A machine that has eaten its first doctrine and is deciding whether it tastes like bread. The writ hums, The ledger purrs. The corridor Lale laid unfurls like a ribbon on the floor. We walk it, the captain, the pilot, the gunner, the surgeon's absence shaped like trust, the quartermaster with a cat that eats names, and we turn legal theory into motion. Behind us, Rhea Solange sits down and puts her rings back on one by one. On the last one, she hesitates. She looks at the empty aisle where a child stood. She looks at the pen. She signs the annex that will make the substitution clause a law instead of a courtesy. She smiles, a clean, tired thing. Containment, she says to Pell, who nods like a man who has put out a fire by telling it to lower its voice. And escalation. Escalation? Pell squeaks, pencil shaking. She gestures at the doors we have just taken. The doctrine is in motion, she says. Now we see who tries to stop it and what they're willing to pay. Doc 12 waits, holding 19 choices the way a bad lung holds air. The exchange waits, holding its breath like a child learning to swim without screaming. The free harbors wait, polishing a space at the table for a job that used to be a woman and will have to be both for a while. Nesta will keep my ledger honest. Rhea will keep my enemies civilized. Sura will keep us fed. Priya will keep the machine saints awake. Lale will keep finding corridors that don't yet exist, then walking them into being. Arwen will keep the cost from scarring the wrong tissue. And me? I will answer writs. I am surety, which is a verb and a wound. The bill is open. The room is listening. The law has been taught a new song, and it wants to sing it loud. We head for Dock 12, carrying bread and a blade and a book that insists questions are weapons. The camera follows until the door closes. The audit is over, only because its consequences have begun. Dock 12 was the easy writ. We walked through a corridor Lale drew out of air and rumor, and the 19 who had been held for their safety stepped into bread scent and witnesses. The ledger sang. The camera blinked. Rhea wrote an enforcement docket like a clean blade. It felt deceptively like the doctrine would be allowed to work simply because it worked. The second writ arrived in the quiet after. It did not knock. It unfolded in the quiet water's galley with the obscene politeness of a summons that knows your name better than you do. The seal was perfect. The phrasing was worse. Writ 2. Satisfaction by labor. Origin. Consolidated Refinery Complex, Gray Halo, Outer Track. Basis. Consent recursion failure, class structural. Affecting 11,204 contracts. Order. Surety to appear and perform work to satisfaction under Section 12 bis. Labor equivalency conversion. Duration. Until ledger deviation is less than or equal to 0.5% across audited pool. Movement bound to complex. Capacity unbound. The language tasted like metal filings. The numbers were so large they could hide any cruelty behind them and call it math. It exploited every clause I had negotiated for mercy. Work, not imprisonment, Priya read aloud, low and murderous. They built a prison that calls itself a job. Lale stared at the star map. The gray halo was a ring of industry clasping a dead moon, famous mostly for the way its welders sang in minor keys so their children would sleep. Outer track, she said. No real corridors. No harbors within 3 days' burn. Aaron looked at me. Not at the ledger. Always at me. It's legal, she said. You wrote it legal. I wrote it survivable, I said. They turned survivable into a weapon. Sura held the writ between 2 fingers like a poisonous fish. It's a trap, she said, which doesn't mean it isn't also true. 11,000 contracts. If even a 10th were coerced. The doctrine demands we go, I finished. The ledger warmed like agreement, and the doctrine is mine. Rhea Solange's face filled the calm, blue with the kind of light that refuses to flatter. I received it too, she said without greeting. It meets the letter. It spits on the spirit. You sign the letter, Priya said, not bothering to be polite. And I'll sign what stops the spitting, Rhea said. But I can't stop the writ from binding, not yet. Her eyes, always the color of something expensive you can't afford to break, moved to me. Keziah, you can insist on satisfactions. You can insist on completing in-progress separations, but you can't refuse the venue. I know, I said. It's work, not a cage. I looked at Sura. You take Doc 12's 19 the rest of the way. Teach them the bread trick. I'll call when I can. Don't be noble, Priya snapped. Be careful. Be both, Aaron said, and kissed my temple the way surgeons kiss luck, without believing in it. Lale's hands hovered over the thrusters. We can't lay a corridor into the halo, she said, but I can find us a seam. Find us two, Sura said. One to send the doctor in, one to pull the bones out. Rhea's jaw flexed in admission that she cared enough to be frightened. I'll meet you at the halo with a paper knife and a camera, she said. We'll make the trap explain itself while it closes. Gray halo greeted me with heat and calculus. The complex was a skein of gantries and furnace mouths, conveyor arteries pumping ore and solvents, a sky made of vapor and money. Work lights were too bright, shadows were too honest. Everything hummed. It was the hum of labor priced as a statistic. An officer in a gray sash laid the writ against the ledger's page, and the page accepted it the way skin accepts a blade if you press hard enough. Not willingly, inevitably. Surety, Keziah Rune, the officer recited, voice flat with practice. You are bound to perform until the deviation drops. You may move within the complex. You may not leave until you satisfy the metrics. Tools are provided. Supervisors will be civil. We appreciate your service. He gestured me toward a glass office above the main floor. Inside, a terminal, 8 monitors, 2 chairs, no windows that opened. The plaques on the wall were not awards. They were compliance dashboards framed as art. This is not imprisonment, the officer said crisply. It's worse, I said. It's a desk. He didn't smile. He had a scar along his jaw that looked like a welding bead. He respected work. He had been told this was work. He wanted to be a good man, and the halo paid in narratives for men like him. Get me the pool, I said, seating the ledger and the coupler. All contracts flagged in the writ, and a live feed from any line where a failure's been detected in the last 72 hours. And a kettle, I added, because tea is a small sedition. While he went to fetch a kettle he would not know how to make sing, I set the ledger to hunger. The page brightened. The recursion engine unfurled. The questions moved through the halo like a front. Do you know your name? Were you told silence equals assent? Did anyone teach you the word choice as a threat? Did the work make it impossible to refuse work? Do you want to stay? Do you want to go? If you cannot say, blink. Across the monitors, data bloomed and curdled. Deviations danced, dipped, rose, refused. Contract language unfurled like a poisonous fern. Efficient clauses tuned to convert need into permission. The halo's ship mind twitched as if it had an itch. Capacity unbound, I murmured, and set to it. The work was brutal in the way good work is. Not in the muscles, but in the honesty. I audited shifts until my eyes thought numbers were weather. I wrote corridor requests that would force supervisors to pause a line long enough to ask the right question. I throttled procurement routines that auto-filled consent with the confidence of a god. I throttled them again when they rerouted. I called for testimony from a catwalk while heat baked my hair and oil freckled my ledger, and I taught a room of workers to lean their weight into a system word and make it say something else. The deviation dropped. Not enough. I kept going. The writ kept humming. At hour 27 I found a line I could not make move. It was a quiet line, no singing welders here. The workers moved in carefully choreographed silence, The ledger's questions tripped circuit breakers. Nothing changed. The deviation number sat like a brick. I pushed harder, and the halo pushed back politely. A supervisor asked me to rephrase. A compliance officer offered a training. An AI suggested a form. The line's silence was not stubbornness. It was designed. I pulled feed. I watched the lunch break. A woman sat at the edge of the catwalk, legs swinging over open air, eating a roll the way people eat when they've forgotten they deserve food that looks like food. Her profile caught the light cheekbones that could carry anger without spilling it, a scar like a crescent under her chin where a mask must have once blown loose. The camera hesitated the way machines sometimes do when they know they are looking at a person who will change them. I knew her mouth. I knew her hands. I knew her, not because I had met her, but because I had been carrying the contour of her absence around like a coin under my tongue. Nesta's mother. The room went quiet. The writ did not. It demanded work. It did not care what I had found. It insisted that satisfaction was a number and that the number could be lowered by grinding. I set my hand on the ledger so hard it hurt. The ledger hummed. A warning and a promise. Name? I asked the line's database. It returned Amara Vel, with a birth date a year off and a middle initial that would foil a lazy search. The halo was polite, but it was not stupid. It had been told to keep some assets quiet. Location? I asked. It returned Catwalk C, Bay 5, Quiet Line 2, the place I was already watching. Consent file. Complete. Choice record. Absent. Reason. Protected status. Religious minister. Consent presumed ongoing pursuant to sacramental oath. They had hidden her under a cassock of data. I pressed the intercom button, breath steady out of spite. Bay 5, Catwalk C, I said, voice carrying its new weight like a stamp the room could not refuse. Worker Vel, Warden of Parley, you are invited to answer a question without cost. The catwalk froze. A few heads turned. Amara Vel did not. She kept eating her roll, neat and steady, hands not shaking. Then, without looking up, she tapped the catwalk rail twice. The ledger's page pulsed. The officer with the kettle chose that moment to return, sweating and proud of the water he had not yet learned to boil properly. He saw my face and did not ask. He set the kettle down like it was a message and left without needing to be told. I should have called Sura. I should have called Nesta. I should have called Rhea. The writ wanted me to call no one. The halo wanted me to disappear into my desk and stamp the world politely into place. Instead, I called Erin. She picked up on the first breath. She's here, I said. Say it, Erin said gently. Amara, I said. Names are a kind of legal instrument when you mean them hard enough. On Quiet Line 2, Erin's exhale was a stitch ripped carefully. I have Nesta, she said. She's checking the oven and pretending not to listen. Don't bring her, I said. I won't, Erin said immediately. But I'll tell her the truth. She can turn that into medicine. Where is Sura? Bribing a docmaster with poetry, Priya's voice cut in, breathless. We traced Rit 2's paperwork. It didn't originate at the Halo. It came down a back channel from Exchange Strategy and Instruments. The signature is masked, but the style, Kez, it reads like Rhea's boss's boss, the strategist. They fed the Halo a clean writ, and the Halo fed you a chair. Proof, I asked. Circumstantial, until it isn't, Priya said. Lale? Threading the tether through a vent they thought was too narrow for paperwork, Lale murmured. I can get Sura into the Halo without a badge, but we can't pull you out if you're bound to active work. I am bound, I said. That's the point of a trap. Then we don't pull you, Sura said, back on the line, her voice the sound of someone lengthening a stride. We pry the trap open with Rhea Solange's spine. You think she'll bend enough? Priya asked. She doesn't have to bend, Sura said. She has to substitute. The clause Rhea had insisted on writing the one that would let the job survive. One of us came up between us like a lifeline we had hidden under the floorboards and pretended to forget. "She'll never," Priya began. "She will," Sura said. "Not because she trusted Rhea, but because she finally trusted the arithmetic of Rhea's pride. She wrote this room into existence. She won't let it eat the wrong person just because the wrong person is us." "Get her proof," I said. "Get her aligned to strategy and instruments. Nail the lie to their door. I'll keep working. I'll prove necessity from inside." "You'll what?" Aaron said flatly. "I'll drop the deviation," I said. "Enough to make the writ obviously malicious when it refuses to release me. If the halo keeps me after measurable satisfaction, it's no longer work, it's a cage under Section 12 bis. We framed those numbers for a reason." Aaron swore in a language that makes swearing sound like prayer. "Don't tear your voice," she said. "It's already torn," I said. "I'll make it sing." The halo fought me with kindness. Supervisors offered me chairs and more forms. The officer with the welding bead scar learned to make my tea properly and brought it when I forgot to ask. Polite sabotage is sometimes worse than violent resistance. It makes you want to say thank you for the hand that holds your head underwater. I met Amara in the only legal way. I scheduled a corridor to Bay 5, a question interval carved out of work. The halo could not refuse. The writ made my voice into a door. She came off the catwalk with a roll in her hand and the skeptical calm of a woman who has survived 3 systems and owes none of them her performance. Up close, the scar under her chin was a small crescent moon. Her hands were ugly in the beautiful way hands are when they know how to make hot metal do obedience. "Amara Vel," she said, "you're the woman who makes the rooms listen." "Sometimes," I said. "Sometimes the rooms pretend." "You have my daughter," she said in the tone of someone checking whether a rumor belongs to her life. "I have her bread," I said. "She has the ladder. She has Sura. She has a promise with my name on it." Amara's mouth flexed. It was not a smile. It was a recalibration. "Ask me your question," she said. "This is a question with 3 answers," I said, and the words tasted like water after a fever. "If you know your name and choose to go where you are taken, say I go. If you know your name and choose to stay where you are, say I stay. If you cannot speak, think either word and touch the wall twice." She did not touch the wall. She did not say, "Stay." She did not say, "Go." She looked at the ledger, then at the halo. Then at my face, which I could not control enough to make neutral because my voice belongs to the ledger now and my face refuses to lie to children or their mothers. "I choose," Amara said slowly, like someone taking a muscle out of a machine to see if it can work alone. "To go." The ledger sang. The page brightened. The writ did not move. "It heard me," Amara said, level. "It did," I said. "The halo did not." She nodded, as if we had confirmed the weather. "Then we do it the hard way." "The hard way is slow," I said, and rolled my sleeves. We worked the doctrine like a crowbar. We took the halo's politeness and made it answer questions it had formatted out of its scripts. We forced 3 quiet lines to go audible. We made the deviation bend under the weight of human answers. We trained supervisors to mean consent when they said it. We taught clerks to like the word no because it protected them too. We set corridor intervals like stitches and enforced rest as a law the same way the halo had enforced overtime. The deviation dropped. 2.6%, 1.9%, 1.1%. The number looked like a promise thinking about being kept. "Release?" I asked the writ politely. "No." "On what basis?" I asked less politely. "Line 2, Bay 9. Consent anomalies unresolved." "Bay 9? I asked the officer with the scar. "We don't have a Bay 9. He didn't blink. "We do now," he said. with a weary dignity I tried not to resent. They were moving the goalposts faster than we could explain the game. Proof, I whispered into the comm. Now. Coming, Priya said, breathless in a way that meant running in boots and fighting with documents. Sura's in strategy and instruments basement with a flashlight and a moral. Lale is streaming her heartbeat to my screen so I can code to it. We've got a thread. Rhea? Rhea's voice entered like a knife, deciding to be a mirror. I have a hearing room and a clerk who doesn't know he's brave. Bring me something I can call fraud without losing my badge. We found it, Sura said, and I saw the thing in my mind before she drew it with words. A load-bearing doctrine simulation. A test suite at Strategy and Instruments that generated edge case writs to crush new mechanisms and record which clauses made them scream. Writ 2 had come from that suite. The strategist had printed a simulation and called it a law, then fed it to the halo to make a point with my body. Tag, Priya panted. Writ 2, Test 7E. E for erase, Lale whispered. Or for evidence. Rhea's breath went in. The recorder in her throat loved that sound. Give me the headers, she said, and a chain of custody, and a witness who can say, I was told to bury this without shaking. I have 3, Sura said. 1 resigned this morning. 1 got promoted yesterday. 1 never got paid. They all hate Armand Delator more than they fear the strategist. They'll sing. They'll need a corridor to the room, Rhea said. Keziah, hold your line. Don't let the number climb. I'll move the paper. Move yourself, Priya muttered. Not kind because kindness would have made it easier. Rhea didn't answer. She didn't need to. You can hear a woman decide to be brave inside the way metal decides to be a bell when you wet your finger and ask it to sing. They served me the substitute writ in the Halo's glass office. It was simple and devastating. Substitution under Solange Rune I. Officer. Commodore Rhea Solange. Offer. To satisfy Writ 2 in the stead of the named surety for a period of 120 hours or until deviation is less than or equal to 0.5% with no artificial bay creation, whichever first. Rationale. Prevent doctrine, sabotage, preserve integrity pending enforcement hearing. I read it twice. The ledger purred. The writ hissed. The officer with the scar looked at Rhea the way a decent man looks at someone he has been told is not on his side and discovers is complicated. This is foolish, I told her on a private channel, because pride is a public instrument and tenderness isn't. They will bury you. They can bury me, she said. They cannot bury us. You need to be moving while I am not. This will hurt, I said. You said doctrine costs, she said, and I heard, under the polished exchange syllables, the voice of a woman who had been honed toward decency by something that had no obligation to make her gentle. You were right. I will owe you, I said. You owe me nothing, she said, and then, lighter because light is also an instrument, except perhaps a ladder lesson. I dislike heights. They are honest, I said. Step where the metal is scuffed. It tells you the story of other feet. The halo accepted the substitution the way a door accepts a key. The writ moved to Rhea like a weather system. The pressure on my chest eased like a belt loosened on a dress that never fit. Go, she said. Before I am tempted to change my mind. Proof is inbound, I said. Hold the number steady. If the strategist tries a third writ, I'll eat it on camera, she said, and killed the channel. I stepped out of the glass office and into heat. The halo muttered. The deviation number quivered, then held. I ran. Bay 5 Amara first. I told her fast and exact. They tried to trap me. Rhea is sitting in the trap. I have 4 hours, while the room figures out what to do with the fact that the wrong person is in the right box. Will you walk if I carry the number and call it a corridor? She looked at the line, the people who had learned to sing again, The supervisor who had learned the shape of no. She nodded once. I will, she said, and then did something I will never recover from. She reached out and smoothed my collar as if I were her child reading at school. Let's go, I said, and my voice made a door. We moved under the halo's eyes. Lale's whisper corridors unfurled like ribbon where there had been nothing, through vents that carried heat and politics, across a scaffold no longer in the schematics, down a stairwell that insisted it did not exist, and sighed when we insisted harder. Priya made the halo's cameras sing a hymn about maintenance intervals. Aaron left a trail of sugar and salt, two things that keep bodies going and wounds honest. At Bay 3 we ran into a wall with a badge. The officer with the scar stepped aside. This is not imprisonment, he said to no one in particular, as if the sentence could forgive him someday. He did not meet Amara's eyes. He kept his job and gave us the hallway. Sometimes integrity looks like that and asks to be forgiven later. Dockside. Sura waited with a hat so rude it was almost legal counsel. She looked at Amara and nodded like a woman completing an inventory and finding the piece she'd hoped for. Your daughter is at the ladder, Sura said. She is pretending to clean her shoes. Amara's mouth went soft and violent. I will pretend to be surprised, she said. I kissed Sura's cheek because there are handfuls of seconds you do not get back. Rhea? In the chair, Sura said, looking like a law. Priya? In the hearing, Priya said grit rough in our ears. The strategist thought he could shame a doctrine. He forgot what Rhea looks like when she is tired of someone's math. She's carving him into precedent. Lale? I said. Thread cut. Corridor burned, Lale said cheerfully. Tell the halo, I took nothing. Then make sure they never want to see me again. We lifted. The halo receded a ring of labor and excuses and men who wanted to be good and the system that didn't care. The ledger quieted. My chest didn't. Don't go forever, Nesta had said. I'm trying, I murmured. You're succeeding, Sura said. The harbor air tasted like flour and old rope. Nesta stood at the bottom of the north ladder with a roll in each fist, mouth set, eyes bright enough to land a ship. She did not run, neither did Amara. They moved toward each other like weather fronts that knew the shared cost of rain. Hello, Amara said. Your shoes are clean. Nesta scowled. They were. Amara lifted a hand and touched Nesta's cheek with a knuckle. I have to ask you a question, she said, law-abiding, even when the law was a kindness. Do you choose to come where I go? Nesta didn't look at me, which was the greatest mercy. I choose, she said clearly, to go with you. The ledger hummed in my pocket without being asked. The doctrine likes to be invited to celebrations. I fled before I made a scene and ruined their privacy. I found Erin in the bakery, washing a bowl like the bowl had called her a liar. She handed me a towel and a look. Go back, she said. I will, I said, after I make sure the strategist doesn't grow a third head. Take a roll, she said. You look thin. Everyone looks thin next to your opinions, I said. She threw a dishcloth at me and smiled like a wound finally closing. Rhea did not eat the third writ. She made it choke on itself. The hearing was a violence with footnotes. Priya slotted exhibits in like shims under a door you intend to slam in someone's face. Sura sat behind Rhea like a second spine. Tomasa Kells took the stand and said, I wrote this line, and I was told to bury this, and know, with a mouth that had learned its muscle memory back. The acolyte from the Calliope Arel stood beside Tomasa and recited the sacrament that had been skinned to hide a procurement crime, then said, I was asked to call it holy. It was not. Rhea used all of it, and none of us. She used the substitution clause she had written with a hand that had shaken exactly once. She sat the hours. She held the deviation under the number like a woman balancing plates at a wake. Then she turned to the strategist and said, "You attempted to disappear a public key into a number. You tested a doctrine on the person who made it because you believed the cost would silence her. You forgot the substitution clause because you never planned to use it yourself. That failure is a structural confession. It's not mitre force oath. She requested sanctions. She requested the creation of a registry of living oath officers, a plural where there had been only me. She requested the disbanding of strategy and instruments in favor of recursion and consent, to be staffed by clerks who could pass a corridor without flinching. The clerk with the bald head forgot to be interim. He banged his gavel until it remembered. The camera learned a new posture. The strategist quit. Not in the good way. Rhea lost something you cannot file under costs. She walked out of the hearing looking like a law that had decided to be a person. She met me on a neutral ring that smelled like coffee and dust. "You were right," she said simply. "So were you," I said. She set her rings on the table in a polite row. "I'm going to be poor for a while," she said, not asking for pity. "You can have my ladder," I said. "It doesn't pay either." She gathered her rings, smiled the clean, tired smile I was starting to recognize as a new doctrine, and went to write resignations that would turn into job descriptions someone else could survive. We built the corridors on purpose now. Not rumor, not kindness, architecture. 6 corridors, 2 in Blue Sluice, 1 in Bitter Harbor, 1 in Old Lattice, 1 in a mining ring that used to call consent a scheduling preference, 1 in a floating hostel where a baker priced bread by how fierce you looked at him. 3 harbors. The number was not magic. It was a promise with scaffolding. We trained oath officers until the job could be a job and not a scar. Tomasa Kells took to it like a woman who had decided to be the person she wished had been in the room when she signed her worst commit. She learned to love the question more than the answer. Arel hair growing back after he shaved his faith to see if it would survive his scalp, wrote liturgies that were also paperwork and taught ship minds to hum them without trying to be priests. I wrote handbooks. I taught rooms to count. I lost an argument to a dockhand and wrote that loss into procedure because he was right. I said no to people I wanted to say yes to because the doctrine disliked favorites and had learned to watch my mouth. I slept more. I slept better. I woke up with less iron in my spit. The ledger still sang. It sang a little quieter. It consented to being set on a shelf sometimes, which is another word for trust. On the day the registry certified the 6th corridor and stamped a duration satisfied, Sura found me at the ladder with a smugness she had not earned and would never deny. "You're out of a job," she said. "I have a job," I said, and breathed the cold like a coin. Quartermaster, warden when necessary, trainer when bribed, aunt when coerced. "Nesta wants to bribe you," Sura said. "Does she?" I said. "With bread," Sura said. "And an ugly hat." Nesta arrived with the hat and a roll, chin lifted, eyes audacious. Amara followed with a look that said she had learned where to press her thumb to keep the bread from sinking and would teach me if I insisted on pretending not to know. "We made a law out of a song," Nesta said, "because rhetorical flourishes are genetic if you eat enough bakery sugar." "Does it keep?" "It keeps if we sweep it," I said. "You want to sweep?" She rolled her eyes 11 going on too old and took my hand. "Tell me the part where you got trapped," she said. Merciless because she understood mercy is not edible. "I worked," I said. "I made the number go down. My rival swapped with me. My crew stole a room and gave it back to the public. We taught a camera to blink in the right places." "And my mother?" she asked, though she had already counted the distance and found me wanting or sufficient. I suspected she did this out of habit now, for the ceremony of hearing it said. "Chose you," I said. She nodded. as if the universe had finally remembered a debt it owed her and paid exact change. "Good," she said. "Teach me the question again." I taught her. She asked Amara. Amara answered. The ledger hummed politely and went back to sleep. The Aurora scratched the airlock with cold tongues. Lale swore in the distance at a new corridor she wanted to walk into existence. Priya shouted a poem at a judge and changed 3 commas that would save 100 hours of someone's life. Aaron told a child he was allowed to flinch and stitched the flinch into the suture so it would heal honest. Rhea, without her rings, but with her mouth, told a room full of legalists that they were now civil servants of recursion and consent. Half of them left. The ones who stayed looked terrified and delighted, which is what duty should look like when it's new. I stood at the ladder with a child who had taught me to price my words like bread, by weight, by warmth, by whether they would still be good in the morning. I was not a corridor anymore. I was a woman at work. The writs did not stop. They never do when you teach a system a word it doesn't like. But the job was no longer my body. It was a manual with signatures, and a registry with faces, and a doctrine that refused to be worshipped, only used. When a writ came, a good one, a bad one, a stupid one, we answered. Sometimes I went, sometimes Tomasa went, sometimes Arel went and made the room sing before it learned to count. Sometimes Rhea called at 3 a.m. and said, "I need a definition," and I said, "You need a nap," and then gave her both. We saved fewer people than we failed. That is the only honest ratio in a universe that keeps the books in blood and heat. But the ones we saved counted themselves, and that number, recursive, changed the room. On the last night of the season of Useful Cold, Sura poured coffee and said, "We're pirates again." "We were always," Priya objected, affronted on behalf of hats. "Pirates with a ledger," Lale said, pleased as a thief discovering municipal funding. "Pirates with a registry," Aaron said, which is how she says family without scaring anyone. I looked at the folio, sitting quiet, edges scuffed, circuits asleep. I looked at the crew. I looked at the sky. I looked at a child, sitting on a ladder like a queen over a kingdom that had learned to ask her consent. "The law learned a lullaby," I said. "Now we teach it to sweep." Nesta shoved the ugly hat onto my head. "You look terrible," she said, delighted. "Beauty is a kind of authority," I said solemnly. "But so is cake." "Cake is not law," she said. "Cake is precedent," I said. "It acknowledges that some things are sweet because someone did the work." She considered that, then handed me a knife. Not Priya's ugly folding one. A bakery knife, serrated, honest. The kind that assumes you will feed people with it and does not mind being washed in hot water that smells like soap and sugar. "Cut," she commanded. "Evenly." I did. I was no longer the corridor. I was the woman who had made sure one existed when needed, then stepped aside so 6 more could be built by hands that were not mine. The ledger approved. It purred once. It went back to sleep. Outside, the comm beacons blinked, like tired saints learning a new prayer. Somewhere, a strategist tried to regrow a department and found the budget full of children's names. Somewhere, a ship mind hummed a lullaby and opened its doors. Somewhere, a woman in a white habit tore pages out of a hymnal and wrote contracts with proper toggles and asked her flock to read them with the lights on. Here, on our ladder, the Aurora licked the airlock, and we let it. The job was not finished. It would never be finished. The cost was not a single scene you could put in a frame. It was a practice. We are pirates. We return people to themselves. We do it with math and lullabies and papers that bite. We do it with bread. We do it with corridors you can walk with your eyes closed because you trust the scuffs. We win by paying the bill and leaving it open for those who come after. We win by insisting the question remains the measure of any room that wants to call itself law. We sweep, we train, we ask again. The water is quieter now. Not still. Never still. Quiet enough to hear the voices we risked everything to make audible. Quiet enough to count. Quiet enough to keep.